My name is Anthony Hitchcock, and my title is Chief Operating Officer for Flagship Restaurant Group.
My name is Tony Gentile. I'm the food guy, but that's not my official title. The official title is Chief Culinary Officer.
Okay.
Yep.
I like food guy.
I do too.
It's just a little more informal. But
it is.
Yeah, I need a different title too, because I don't know about Chief Operating Officer. In fact, we're always quick to shut down the word corporate.
Yeah.
Hey there, Omaha. Welcome into another episode of Restaurant Hoppen. I'm your host, Dan Hoppen, and back in 2002, a group of food-loving friends came together to open a sushi restaurant in Omaha. Little did they know what all they were getting themselves into. The Flagship Restaurant Group now has 46 locations across the U.S. that include not only sushi, but Mexican, seafood, Mediterranean, gastropub, and other fares, and they're not stopping anytime soon. Here to tell me all about it are two of the owners, Tony Gentile and Anthony Hitchcock. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Honored to be here.
Yep.
Okay, so because we've got multiple voices on the podcast, I would love for each of you to just introduce yourself and then maybe just say your role in the company.
Sure. My name is Anthony Hitchcock, and my title is Chief Operating Officer for Flagship Restaurant Group.
My name is Tony Gentile. I'm the food guy, but that's not my official title. The official title is Chief Culinary Officer.
Okay.
Yep.
I like food guy.
I do too.
It's just a little more informal.
It
but
is.
Yeah, I need a different title too, because I don't know about Chief Operating Officer. In fact, we're always quick to shut down the word corporate.
Yeah.
Because it's not a real fair representation of our organization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because of our size, yes, and it's really relevant as far as consistency and just standards and such, but we're still just a big family.
I would like to preface, I am the food guy, but if everything's good, you can tell me about it. If it's not, you can tell Ben Maids about it.
I love that, and I fully endorse that. It's all Ben's fault if it's bad. Well, we can work on getting you guys some new official titles after the podcast, but for right now, I mean, this is normally the spot in the show where I'll be like, hey, if you're listening to this and you want to check out X restaurant, it's located here. I can't do that with you guys because you guys have all kinds of restaurants. And we're just going to mostly focus on Omaha in this episode, but you guys are all over the country now. But just in Omaha, you got several locations of Blue, several locations of Blatt. There's Roja, there's Memoir, there's Clio. You've got a couple more concepts that are opening or have just opened when this comes out. I mean, when you look at all that Flagship Restaurant Group has, especially in Omaha, what do you see as the through line through all the concepts that kind of keep them tied together?
Honestly, probably just the culture of our organization. So I feel like when you dine at one of our restaurants in Omaha, you really, whether it's Clio or Blue or Roja, you get the same experience just from the way that we've kind of created this culture within our team for just how they kind of then deliver the experience that we're trying to deliver to our guests. It's kind of a consistent execution on the operational side that the guests then feel the same thing. And I would even go as far to say even on the design, the ambiance and the music, kind of the level of music that we play, just the volume that would be at, and just the enhancements in the ambiance. So I think it's, but I think probably just really to the team. I mean, we all just kind of jive the same way.
Anything to add to that, Tony?
I always like to, from a food standpoint, always like to talk about the tie that binds, right? So, all of the different components, between the restaurants that make the restaurants uniquely different from a food standpoint. And what we really try to focus on is quality, obviously. And, making sure that we're sourcing the best that we can for the application that we can. In some instances, specifically with Blue and Plank, in some of our other restaurants, we try to stick to a higher animal welfare program. We try to stick to a responsible sourcing of fish program. And inevitably, these things just create they're treated better. So it creates a better landscape for your food that you're cooking. So for me, from a food standpoint, it's just really sticking to a lot of those fundamentals, but also consistency, coming up with systems that is delivering, our message and our vision for what a plate should look like, and making sure that it's that same one every single time. So creating consistency, definitely creating great relationships with different vendors and fish providers, and kind of using those through the entire process across all restaurants.
That kind of leads into a quote that I found you had for another publication that I wanted to ask you about, Tony. You said, to put it simply, we just enjoy food, which is exactly how we've determined to expand our concepts to cover a variety of cuisines. How does that statement kind of embody the flagship or the ethos of Flagship Restaurant Group?
I'm not sure where that was, but I mean, it's pretty spot on. I mean, this guy and I, from the moment that we met, and I mean, this was at University of Houston, I don't know, 20-something years ago.
25 years ago.
Yeah, and it just, we have all evolved just in the food landscape, but we eventually just get into these traveling expeditions that we go on, and we just really fall in love with specific types of food and applications, and just kind of what those places are accomplishing, and then we turn around and kind of live that statement through creating new restaurants. So, I think that's pretty spot on.
Yeah, when I had Ben and Nestor on to talk about Clio specifically on a podcast, he talked about how they just went to Chicago and ate at like 20 Mediterranean restaurants over like 3 days, and then tried to determine what they liked about certain places, what could be improved on. Oh, that got these wheels spinning.
Yeah.
I sense that's kind of the thing with you guys too.
I was getting texts all day long those 2 days from Ben and Tony
It was
all
Ben
their
and
dishes.
It was Ben and me.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Of all their dishes. And actually I was invited on that trip, but I just can't eat the same amount of quantity of food as Tony and Ben can.
I was going to say, that sounds like heaven, but I don't know how you do that.
I always tell people it's a lifestyle.
They showed me their itinerary, and there was like a 4:00 reservation, a 5:30 reservation, a 7 reservation, a 9 o'clock reservation. And I actually checked in with them at 9 o'clock just to make sure they were really still on schedule and still eating. And then they sent me a photo at 9:15 of this new dish they just ordered. So I actually was thankful that I didn't attend, because I can't consume that much.
It's a lifestyle.
But I partially I'm envious too. And we do, Tony and I, as well as our business partners, and even individuals that work with us in the organization, we travel quite a bit, and specifically to dine out and to just see kind of what's out there and learn. There's only so much in Omaha. We've got some wonderful restaurants in this city, but some of the larger cities like Chicago is so easy to get to. Denver, Houston. There's a lot going on with different ethnic restaurants that you can really take away quite a bit.
That literally sounds like my heaven. Just traveling and exploring. I mean, I know your jobs are more than that. Yeah. I'm simplifying it a lot, but the part of it that you just described, that is like the greatest thing that I can imagine.
Yeah. It's we're fortunate, very fortunate for that aspect of what we do.
The reality of it is hospitality, encompassing food, service. It moves quick. There's always better ways to do it. There's always better ways to build restaurants. There's always better ways to kind of make your concept cohesive. And it's just, learning from other people and continuing to educate yourself is just a huge part of our process. Mm-hmm. So that's part of it.
You mentioned consistency earlier, Tony.
Yeah.
Other than that, what do you think? I mean, we're talking 22 years ago, you guys got together and opened one sushi restaurant, Blue. And now you've got basically an empire that just continues to grow and opens 8 to 10 concepts a year. I mean, you guys are all over the place. What do you think has been the most important aspect of your growth? Or the biggest contributing factor, maybe is the better way to say that.
I would probably just say developing the team that we hire, right? So just really latching on to each individual that we bring onto our team and making sure we're giving them the tools to succeed and teaching them the ways that we do what we do, and just good oversight of that, great communication with them, and just having the correct systems in place and training materials in place so that they can continue to grow within organization and stay with us, because the turnover in the industry is what I think causes a lot of hospitality, or restaurants challenges when you're just turning your team over, because the experiences for the guests just don't end up being the same. It's really nice to go to a restaurant and see the same faces, and those team members just only get better at what they do the longer that they're with you. And it's quite an honor to go through our team, our organization, in the amount of time that so many of them have been with us. I mean, our regional directors started off as hourly chefs or servers or bartenders, and they're now regional directors with 6 to 8 restaurants underneath them. And
that's incredible.
It's really incredible. I guess I would just say that is really what's allowed us to do what we've done and what we will continue to do going forward.
So I know asking this question is like asking you to pick your favorite kid, but I'm going to do it anyway. I would like you guys to maybe focus more on Omaha, but of all the concepts, I know you're proud of all of them, but is there one that you're particularly proud of, or that is your favorite to eat at, or whichever direction you want to take it?
Tread lightly.
Yeah.
I'll start by answering that.
Sure.
I get this asked a lot, and I'm going to give you the purest answer I can. They each have a special place in my heart for different reasons.
For sure.
Rojas specifically, we grew up on Tex-Mex, and, so that one's a very comforting kind of concept for me. Blue, I've spent a lot of time with, and I've cultured it, and I've cultivated it. So it also is like, and it's, specifically here has the longest tenured employees, so it kind of feels like home, so Blue obviously is very special, You
have to say one.
I know, but I'm just telling you individually. Here's the deal. I can't say one. It's not possible. I can't even bring myself to do that, but they're all special to me. As we continue to get into some of these newer concepts, we're just playing around with different things than we have in the past, just in terms of, techniques and different things. And I love that as well, but
maybe because you're the chef, the food guy, it's hard for you to just say one.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. But
I think I have one.
You've got one?
Well, yeah, but I can't go straight to the one. I'll just say right now I would say it's Cleo, only because it's the most recent one we've opened. But if you ask me this in like 3-4 months, I'm almost certain Blue will be still my favorite. I'm a fish guy. I eat at Blue 2 or 3 times a week. And I think when you eat, if I eat at Blue 2 to 3 times a week, it's got to be my number one.
Yeah.
Probably. That's fair.
Yeah.
And I love what we do at that concept and how that concept's evolved. And there's just so much. In fact, we were just talking about this before we came over here. We're trying to revamp Blue's menu possibly. It's just there's a lot on that menu, but in a way I like that. I've just got a lot of options, but it has its advantages and disadvantages as we continue to evolve that brand. But so for today it would be Cleo, but if you ask me in 3 months, Blue would be back at the top. Cleo's brand new, and there's just a lot of it's exciting for us.
I mean, along those same lines, people always ask me, what's your favorite thing to cook? And my answer isn't always one specific thing. It's always just seafood. That's if I have to cook one thing today and I'm going to cook for you, I'm cooking seafood, So to his point, a lot of the seafood that's involved in a lot of our restaurants, I've particularly loved. So, yep.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite one?
I mean, again, recency bias, Cleo and Memoir. Cleo would probably be my favorite because I really enjoy Mediterranean food.
Yeah.
But I've had, from the moment I stepped inside Memoir, I was just like, am I in like a 5-star hotel or a restaurant? I was just so impressed by it.
Thanks.
But and that's the thing, there are different aspects to it. Like if I want a fancy date night with my wife, I'll probably take her to Memoir. If I want I went to Blue the other night by myself for dinner. I was like, I just feel like having sushi tonight, just in like a nice casual place. Boom, Blue was perfect for that. I can also have a good date night there. They're just different atmospheres, and they offer different things. So it might depend on just the situation, the mood, whatever it might be. Yeah,
sure. Or where you are in town.
Exactly, that too.
Yeah.
All right. I want to take you guys back to the beginning. You mentioned the University of Houston. That's where you guys met. You worked together at a place called Eatsy's. What originally drew you to one another? How did you become friends?
Yeah, I'll take this.
I'm going to preface this. There's going to be some truth to this, and some not. And there's really no third-party verification, so we'll just take it at face value.
I think I won't even bring any of that into it.
Okay, perfect.
So we were in the break room at Eatsy's together. Tony was actually a prepared food chef at Eatsy's, just this incredible market that still exists there in the DFW area, and I think they're growing a little bit. This was in Houston. So he was a prepared food chef, and I was an employee that worked behind the deli and served the food to guests that he had made, right? So someone come in and say, I'll take a half a pound of the seafood bow tie pasta salad. Well, Tony had made that, and I'd scoop out the half a pound. Learned a ton about food there. Anyway, we were sitting in the break room, and he looks over at me, and he's like, are you in my math class? And I was like, yeah, I think so. And so we ended up realizing that not only were we working at the same place, we were also studying the same thing at the University of Houston. And so that kind of made it pretty easy to just kind of start to connect a little more. We were working together and going to school together. So we did. We started hanging out a little more and seeing each other more in the hallways in the classroom and talking a little more at work, and then kind of spending time together outside of work. And that's where it began. And then I'll kind of carry the story on a little longer. As we graduated, we both ended up getting hired on by the same grocery chain in Texas,
H-E-B.
Called H-E-B, and worked at this incredible grocery store market called Central Market. I mean, I think on a given day they've got 30 different apples and 700 different cheeses. So we learned a lot about food, and Tony continued to be the prepared food chef, but now at this larger market, Central Market, and I kind of oversaw the prepared foods department and then ended up being in the seafood department. Can I take you right up to Omaha, how we got here?
If you want to, you can keep going as long as you, Tony, feel free to interject at any time.
It's kind of
I would just say that along the way that he and I started to find very quickly that we really liked a lot of the same things.
We bonded over seafood and fishing, right?
Yeah, that and fishing, and we just clicked, and it was only a matter of time before Anthony will lead up to the next part of it. But yeah, we just kind of clicked right away.
Yeah, there were a lot of trips to the coast during those college days where we'd fish from 10 at night till 6 in the morning. Get back and go to school, and so we found out we had a lot of similar hobbies, and so then just randomly one day, and we both were extremely content where we were. We were very fortunate to get offered positions with H-E-B out of college, and had huge upside for possibilities within that organization. Loved where we lived in Houston. I just gotten married to my wonderful wife Allie. And Tony was still trying to get on his feet. He's a chef, so he was still trying to kind of get things figured out. And my cousin, who was a very close childhood friend of mine, called me. He'd just gotten his law degree and asked me if I wanted to move to Omaha, Nebraska to open a sushi restaurant with him. And I was quick to tell him I wasn't interested. I liked where I was. I liked what I had going on. And I just didn't really think moving to Omaha was the right move. He said, listen, let me just fly you up here, come see what's going on. And he did. And at that same time, I had heard something on NPR that people 6 years and older, the one thing they regret most is not taking more risks. And it stuck with me. And I kind of liked what I saw in Omaha. And Nick said, okay, you'll be the general manager and the executive chef of this sushi restaurant. And I was like, Nick, it doesn't really work that way. I'm not going to be both. But I've got a really good friend who maybe could be the chef. And he's like, all right, well, let's pursue that. So I offered Tony to be the chef. And he said, I'll move up with your wife for 6 months, and I'll help you guys get this sushi concept open. So sure enough, he followed us behind our U-Haul from Houston to Omaha in his car, moved into the apartment with us, and we created Blue Sushi's food menu out of steeplechase apartments on 150th and Maple. I remember carrying the brown bags up the stairs, and that was 22 years ago.
We killed that. I'm just telling you. We killed that project.
His 6 months turned into 22 years and counting.
Yeah.
We're still here. Both have raised families here now.
Which I'd like to say I also met my wife Ashley here.
And are love that we can say we're from Omaha, Nebraska.
Yep.
So it's been amazing, and I'm glad I was listening to NPR that day because taking risks is very important, and I think we did the right thing.
So I got to ask you a question. I'm sure that you asked your cousin, Nick Hogan, when he originally made that call. Why sushi in Omaha? Because, like, now that seems super obvious. We've got sushi restaurants all over the place. We're talking back in the early 2000s. There might have been one other sushi joint in Omaha at the time.
Yeah.
Well, what was his thinking behind? Because you said he was an attorney.
Like he'd just gotten his law degree, so
right.
He'd studied in Arizona and in San Diego, and in the early 2000s, sushi was really on fire in those big cities, coast, California, Texas. I mean, in Houston, we had 100 plus sushi restaurants back then. So he really had a vision with a couple other gentlemen, because it wasn't just Nick, that saw this opportunity where, sushi's on fire on the coast, and there's one in Omaha, Nebraska, right? So it certainly, the city can handle more than one, right? And so looking back, it was brilliant. It made a lot of sense because, I would say within, 10 years, there was 10 at least in the city of Omaha. It's really just taken off in all cities because sushi is just something that it's very addicting. And people that get into it, they have to have it once a week or once a month. And so there's definitely room in a market like Omaha for more than one sushi restaurant.
Oh, for sure. But was there, when you're introducing basically a new cuisine to a city, there's some risk involved with that too, because what might work on the coast might not work here, especially when Omaha, right in the middle of the country, like not necessarily known. And again, there are ways around this, and I think you guys have achieved it, but not known for fresh fish. Like, people aren't thinking seafood in Omaha. Was there any trepidation on you guys' part of just like, what if Omaha doesn't get this?
I don't think we're that smart to think.
Yeah. Honestly, people ask me all the time, like, what's the key? What was the key to get to where you were at? And I'm like, being young enough to know no difference.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And having nothing to lose, right? You put those two things together, and it's at the point where it's passion takes over, and drive and motivation, and to say, hey, we're going to do this, and we're going to give it everything we got.
The other thing that I think we were really fortunate on is, we have another partner, Tom Elisma, and he just did an incredible job on the design of that original location. You walked in there, it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
There was nothing like it in the city. And so
absolutely,
you got to think about when you dine out, it's the full experience, right? So we can bring sushi in Omaha, that's great. But when you walked in and there was a fountain and these light boxes and an aquarium and, it was very catchy, great music. And I think that the city was, embraced that and was excited to have something that was sushi, but also just this really, your date night or your place to go celebrate.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned you two and Nick and Tom were kind of the core four and still are. Mm-hmm. But at that time, none of you had opened a restaurant or had experience doing this. What kind of crash course did you guys put yourselves through? What kind of research did you do to be able to successfully open this?
I wish I could show you a drawing of the design of that restaurant, because it was extremely inefficient. The dish room, you returned into this hole down. You had to return the plates down in this hole, and then the dishwasher would get those. And nothing was designed correctly. So we've learned a lot. I don't know. I think that really Tony and I and our partners are just, failure is not an option. And Tony and I were working 7 days a week, 6-7 days a week for that first year, but it wasn't even, I wouldn't think twice, It was just, we were determined to
engineered that way
to get it right and to create these awesome experiences for guests and build a team that could be our friends and watch these individuals grow within an organization. And
in those early days, we did lean on some partners that we had taken from Texas. I don't know if you remember that. You had created some good, we were using, I remember the fish vendors that we were using down there. We were flying fresh fish in from there. Anthony and I had actually had a little bit of experience opening these central markets. So we would go around from each central market and were you opening Central Markets
Yeah,
at the time?
yeah.
So we were opening new stores, so we knew a lot about kind of some of the upfront work as far as like the conceptualizing part. We really grew into that over a period of time and years.
Yeah, and prior to meeting Tony in college, I mean, I had worked in restaurants since I was 16. So a lot of, background in the industry. But yeah, I mean, still when I look back, I'm like, how did I even create like the cocktail menu? And how did I come up with the wines? And how did Tony, there was some really great memories from those early years. I mean, I remember one night where everyone in Tony's line called out, and it was a Friday night, and we had a full.
I remember you all, just so you know.
The books were completely full that night, and he cooked the whole menu by himself that whole night. We lived together, so he got off, cleaned his kitchen quick, left it probably not completely clean because he had a team come in the morning. He was probably exhausted, went home. Yeah. And then I finished the day, locked the door, came home and opened up his bedroom door. He was asleep, and I actually just did a flying jump on him, just like I was so proud of him, And
that one made me stronger, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was some good times.
So sourcing, such an important thing. You already mentioned it, Tony. Mm-hmm. Especially when it comes to seafood. And that was your job as the food guy to figure out how are we going to source in the middle of America, how are we going to get fish that not only tastes fresh, but tastes great.
Yeah.
How did you go about doing that?
It was a step-by-step process through the years. I mean, we'd already always had some good relationships, but one thing that we didn't focus on in the early years was transparency and really figuring out where our fish was coming from and really figuring out all the intricacies that it would take to get it here. Nestor, who was on the show earlier, he and I took, I would say from start to finish, about 2 years to start to meticulously work with our seafood providers on figuring out exactly where our fish was coming from and figuring out if these fish were traceable, if they had certain eco certifications that kind of made them more traceable. And through that process, had created some just incredible relationships. One of them, Anthony and I were just in Maine
last
week, and there's a lady up there, Sarah Rademacher. I'm sorry if I said your last name wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's right. She raises our eels for us there in Maine in a recirculating aquaculture system, which is one of the most eco-friendly ways of raising seafood is land-based. And she ships all those eels to all the blues. So all the unagi comes from a lady here in Maine, and
it's called American Unagi.
Yeah.
It was our first time to visit the facility, and it was just quite an experience, and it's an incredible product. I mean, if you ate our unagi, and unagi that's probably in the red, which is what you're going to see, and when I say in the red, this is a rating from Monterey Bay Seafood Watch, which is who we partner with, but I would say 90 to 95% of sushi restaurants across the world are serving what Monterey Bay would put in the red. And I served you that, and I served you hers, blind tasted you. You would pick hers every single time. Not only is it a responsibly sourced product from how we look at sourcing, but it's an incredible product. It's delicious.
It really is.
So we had the opportunity to go visit with her last week. And I just think what he's talking about, these partnerships are extremely important. Because they understand our commitment and they're delivering, taking extra care to make sure they're getting us, the best of the best in this quick amount of time as possible.
Yeah. So, just to carry on that a little bit. So once you get into this and you go down this rabbit hole of responsibly sourcing seafood, and what inevitably ends up happening is there's companies and groups out there that share the same passion you do, right? So then they get a hold of you and they just start parlaying into another relationship, and some work out and some don't. We have a lot of what I call premier partnerships, and it's just the time that they use to take care of this seafood and make sure that it's that it's processed correctly and that it's raised correctly and that it's good for the environment just translates into a better product at the end of the day. So.
There's a cost that comes with it.
Yeah.
Certainly we could buy a different eel or a different salmon or a different hamachi. Probably most of the time people would notice the difference and it would be less expensive. But I just think to us it's more than that.
Yeah, you would know.
Yeah, yeah. And we like to fish. And we want to be able to continue to fish.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit. You mentioned it briefly there, Anthony, but about the partnership with Monterey Bay, that aquarium, and just what does that partnership look like, and how did that come to be?
I'm going to let Tony take that one because he kind of drove that whole program from start to finish.
Without getting too technical, because this gets these partnerships with these seafood conservation groups or seafood advocacy groups, it's very far and very vast. And in fact, they agree on certain things and other things they don't agree on, right? And when it comes to the Seafood Watch, their just science-based approach to rating their seafood is very good. And they put a lot of time and resources into it. And we basically base what we source from them off of their 2 ratings, or their 3 ratings. One's red, one's yellow, one's green. And we don't ever source anything in the red, ever. Stuff that's in the yellow and stuff that's in the green, always. Green's always best. Yellow means that it's still good, but there's some work that needs to be done and there's some advocacy that needs to happen on that end. A lot of seafood groups don't use the yellow rating. And the reason that they don't is they either go red or they go green. The problem with that is when there's no yellow rating, nobody's advocating for them. There's no money coming from them. There's no fishery improvement project money going to them. And what happens is inevitably they end up just slipping into the red. So if you have a yellow rating, that yellow rating allows for these fisheries to continue to make improvements. And there's money and advocacies that's funneled to them to continue to do so. So partnering with the Monterey Bay Aquarium was for several reasons. And that's why we decided to do it. And that's why they continue to educate us. And our partnership is very strong. And we continue to learn from them, and they continue to advocate for us, and we advocate for them. And
but it dictates a lot of what we're able to offer.
Yeah.
We just recently had to pull, it's been 6 months maybe, but snow crab had to come off a Blues menu completely because it went into the red. And that was tough. I mean, it was something I loved. It's something that guests I ran into. A lady here in Omaha a couple weeks ago, and she's like, "You don't have the snow crab anymore," and she was so upset about it. I'm like, I know, I'm upset too, but unfortunately, it's not in a good state, and we need to help protect it and hopefully get it back to a better state to where we can serve it again.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, I'm going to jog you guys' memories a little bit. Take me back. First day that Blues opened in 2002. When you think of that day, that night of service, whatever it might be, what pops to the front of your mind?
Well, for me, it's always the same thing. I had this great idea that I was going to infuse vodka with fresh fruit behind the bar, and I bought these vessels that had these little spigots on the front of them, and we'd put the fruit up in there, and it had to sit there for 7 to 10 days depending on the fruit. And I told the bartenders how this is all going to work, and tickets were going to print into the well, and the Blue Teeny, which is actually still on our menu, so 22 years later, and it's still probably top 3 selling martini on Blues menu nationally, had blueberries in it. And the bartender that was working that night, she still works for us. She bartended for 20 years. She now works in our corporate office with us, or our office. Yeah. And she went to turn that spigot, and I mean, we're super busy, but the seeds and the blueberries were getting stuck in the spigot, so they couldn't get any more vodka to come out. So and these are glass jars. They're trying to shake them, and here we are. Another ticket's printing, and so that's just one of that sticks out in my mind because it was this is one of those things you don't think about, right? You think you've got this great idea, and then it's the first night, and everything's falling apart. And that was definitely a blunder.
I mean, it's hard for me to really articulate what was going on in that particular day, but I will tell you that Nick Hogan came up with one really terrible idea. And but we had to execute it, and it sticks in my mind this day, and every once in a while it comes back up. And
we joke with him about it all the time.
But he had an idea to do tableside creme brulee, and it just did not translate the way we had it in our head. So I remember that, and all of a sudden being like, well, you know what? We're not doing tableside creme brulee anymore.
We're just this big torch gun out to the table, and people be sitting around.
Oh man! But no.
So we stopped doing tableside creme brulee, and we decided to then filter the vodka and have batches already prepared, so you could just pour it out without having to do the little spigot thing per drink per order.
But you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes you gotta you gotta run before you walk.
And we still make very similar. I don't even know if you call them mistakes, but we still, when we open Clio or Memoir, there's still things like that we think is going to be the right way, and then day one, day two is just.
I usually know it's not going to be the right way. I just don't say anything. No, but we've had a lot of those instances through the years, like opening Roja and not having Expo figured out and it just being a complete disaster. It's like these little stepping stones, through the.
Every time I see Willie Thiessen, he still asks me, is that filet still sitting in the window at Roja?
Yeah, so we've had a lot of these, crash and burn, type of situations that just, they force you to learn. Those are the biggest lessons you can learn,
Mm-hmm.
So we definitely appreciate them looking back, so.
But you've learned a lot. Blue has evolved a lot over time. And really, sushi as a concept has evolved a ton in the past 22 years, and what people are willing to try, what people want to eat. And I found a quote from Nick. He said, and this is from a couple of years ago, so it's a little outdated, but he said, when we started 16 years ago, the vast majority of people were California roll eating people. As time has gone on, their palates have matured, and they look for stuff that's a little more out there. I think we've done a great job over the years of evolving our menu to keep pace with that. What kind of adjustments have you made, and how have you seen Blue evolve into what it is today?
Well, probably what he's referencing, 16 years ago. If we could look at Blue's menu 16 years ago to Blue's menu now, there's a lot more raw offerings on it. But you still have to have those semi-Americanized rolls, because there's folks that just don't like raw fish, but they can handle a California roll.
But there's a good majority of people that transition, so they start here, then they go here, then they end here, so there's a lot of converts.
My daughter.
Well. Yeah.
But my son is still over here. My son's older, but he's still, shrimp tempura roll.
Yeah.
I think Dave, Dave Utterbach's a really good friend of ours. He would tell you the same thing. He does just some incredible raw fish dishes at his restaurants, but he still has to have, versions of the California roll, because there's kind of two sides to that. But to Nick's statement, I think our country has just progressed, and there's just more folks willing, and not only willing, but enjoying the raw versions of these rolls, or just straight sashimi or nigiri. And we didn't have, I would say 15 plus years ago, we didn't have specialty sashimi dishes on our menu. And if we did, we wouldn't have sold them.
You can kind of take that same quote and kind of extend it out and look at it from like a demographic standpoint. For instance, there are more children and more kids that eat sushi today than there ever has been. If you go into Blue and you look at the demographic today versus when we first opened Blue, the younger generation that are coming up are just getting more adventurous and, eating things that, I didn't think that would ever be possible, so, along those lines, the demographic, which we love to see, and I think it's awesome to see, the younger generations eating sushi. It's just a kind of a full circle kind of moment. But
parents never really like to think that this is possible, but anytime there's a family with children in a Blue and I see the children and they're trying to get them to figure out what to eat, I always take them some ikura, which is salmon roe. And they're like, I don't know about that. And I'm like, I just try it. And then all of a sudden the kid's just like putting these, it's just like salty pops, right? And the kid, before you know it, the bowl of ikura is gone. I'm like, it's 9 times out of 10, they're going to enjoy it, and I think to Tony's point, we're seeing more and more families with children, and the children are the one kind of driving the ordering of just loading up with sushi.
So Blue comes out, good success pretty much right off the bat. And then in 2004, Roja opens. You guys have spoken about your shared love of Tex-Mex, so I think that's kind of the why behind it. But I'm curious, A, how did you know that it was time for a second restaurant or concept? And B, why Roja and not a second location of Blue?
Well, so let me step back a second. The first year of Blue was not just immediate success. we struggled the first 6 to 8 months. And when we opened,
Well, then we went into the winter.
yeah. We learned quickly that falls in Nebraska with, Cornhusker football and college football in general.
Kids going back to school.
You lose your Saturdays in school. And so that fall was really tough. And I think we were kind of nervous, and we were like, whoa, what did we get ourselves into? But again, we just kept, tweaking the menu a little bit, tweaking the steps of service, working on all the details. And we kind of got to the other side, maybe 8, 9, 10 months, and kind of started seeing some
return.
People were starting to enjoy what we were doing. And I think it was probably a conversation with Nick. Tony and I, again, growing up in Texas, there's Tex-Mex every corner. And my family, the original Chuy's was in Austin, Texas, and my family would take us to Chuy's every Friday. And Tony probably had the same experiences with Papacitos. And so that's what we grew up with, and we couldn't find Tex-Mex in Omaha. So I was telling Nick, we have to, for Tony's and I's sake, for sure, we need a Tex-Mex restaurant in this city.
Yeah.
And he liked the idea. Tom and Nick both agreed. And again, I think it was just part of, even at that time, we were traveling and eating out, and that was just kind of the next step for us, was to just do a different concept before we did a second of the first. Sometimes I look back and say, we probably financially would be more successful if we just stayed on track and all we did was blues. But for us, this really isn't about financial success. It's about having fun and having these experiences and being able to look back at what we've done. And it would be boring to say, yeah, we've got 50 blues, versus saying, wow, we've got Memoir and Clio and Ghost Donkey and Champagne Lane. That's fun, right? So, I think it was just part of what we were about. We were about variety and being creative. And so that was just kind of naturally the next thing, was just a different concept.
And you kept going. Now there was a little bit of a gap. You guys stuck with those two concepts for a while, but then in 2012 you opened Blatt, 2013 Plank, 2015 Flagship Commons, which is inside Westroads Mall, right?
Correct.
I always get Westroads and Crossroads confused in my head. I don't know why.
You're not the only one.
It's very much Westroads.
Yeah.
You're missing one, and maybe
what am I missing?
You maybe don't know this, but we opened a concept in 2006 called Bianco, and that was our Italian concept. It was wood-fired pizzas, fresh pasta, small plates, and that was at 132nd and Maple. It's where Bebo's was, I think, before us, but it was called Bianco. And it was fantastic. Just to try to help justify this, we like to say we were ahead of the time.
You look at how much wood-fired pizza there is in Omaha now, I think.
Because folks would come in and say, where's the spaghetti and meatballs?
Yeah.
Like the big plate of, and we're like,
we were coursing out, small pastas and, antipasti and
a nice wood-fire oven with wood-fire pizzas. But so we did do Bianco's, was our third concept, before we then ended up doing two more blues, Baby Blue at the Shops of Legacy and Blue Old Market, and then kind of what you've got in your map there.
And I would like to say that at some point, not anytime soon, I'd like another shot at Italian.
So do you think Omaha just wasn't ready for that? Because now we have that style of Italian restaurant. We have several very good ones, but were we just, as a city, not ready for it back then?
Maybe slightly, but location was probably a little bit part of it too. I think there was quite a few factors.
I think a lot of it was just an experience at the day parts at that point, because we weren't open for lunch. We only opened for dinner, and not getting those things all figured out and figuring out, on and off peak hours, and just only opening for dinner and then carrying all that labor to try to come in and prep it. It just sometimes doesn't work. So I think it was a culmination of a lot of things.
Yeah. I would agree.
So you guys talked about learning from failure. What do you think you learned most from that opportunity that has helped to fuel your success moving forward?
Really simple. Understand your demographic. Really, really simple. Understand, who who are you cooking for, at the end of the day. And that, specifically for that one, I think it was a lack of research and just a lack of not understanding what we were up against. You know what I'm saying? And And then obviously the day part thing I think is a big one. But I just don't think that people loved that food the way I loved it at the time. You know what I'm saying? So I think that was a little bit of it.
Yeah. I mean, Old Chicago is in the same center, and, they were just extremely busy, right? So we were going up against, and no knock on Old Chicago, because I actually lived in Boulder, Colorado until I was 14, where Old Chicago originated from, and ate there quite a bit as a little kid, and did even when I moved here. But you're going up against the demographic that was supporting Old Chicago, and we had this, wood-fired pizza place with scratch-made pasta, and it's a little early, I think.
When you say understanding your demographic, how do you research the demographic and figure out, okay, here's how we think, or here's who we think is going to be eating at the restaurant, here's what age we think they'll be, here's what their palate wants? Like, what does that research even look like?
I don't know. That's a tough question. I mean, I think in this instance, you kind of have to start backwards. And at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to capture the largest demographic we can, and in order to do that, I would say that there's no perfect science to it. It's something that you have to have your best feel for, capturing as many people as you can, making sure that a menu is engineered for that purpose, making sure that the drinks, the service, all of the ancillary things that add up to this one great sum are all hitting. But you also have to be ready to react. You have to be ready to react to what the customer's telling you inside of that restaurant. And taking all of these hints and kind of looking at, menu engineering, and, that gets a little technical, but looking at velocity of what's selling and what's not selling. And really it starts to paint a picture of what you should or should not be doing.
I mean, site selection's extremely important, and Nick drives that for us. He's out on the road and working with, brokers and landlords across the country. And, we've actually closed several restaurants. We've closed a Blue, we've closed a Blatt, we've closed a Roja. And we've learned from each of those just specifically more on how to hone in on the right site to kind of hit that demographic for whatever that brand is. Mm-hmm. And he's gotten tremendously better at it. And he's done actually an incredible job. And so, people maybe realize that, but we've closed restaurants, it's tough. But you just kind of have to get back up on your feet and learn from what you did wrong and try again.
Mm-hmm. Now, we made fun of Ben Maids a little bit earlier, but in all reality, dude is a super talented guy, amazing chef. He's the co-owner of Au Courant. He's a James Beard Award semifinalist. I mean, he has been recognized as a true culinary talent. And in 2021, April of 2021, you guys were able to bring him on the team and be a part of the culinary team. What was kind of the driving force behind bringing him on board, and what has he been able to bring to Flagship?
So Ben and I have actually been friends for quite some time. So I'd say 5 to 10 years prior to that, Ben and I had been in touch, and when he was cooking at Avali or any of the other prior restaurants, I would always go in and see him and say hi, and we just stayed in touch. In fact, I remember talking to him probably in 2018 or 2019 at Flagship Commons about an opportunity. And so we were always just kind of in touch about, is there an opportunity that interests Ben and works for us as well? Because of what you just said. I mean, he's extremely talented. He's an amazing human being. I'm very good friends with Ben, more than I'm a coworker with Ben. Like we're buds. And as we continue to branch out with new concepts, the food guy can't do it all by himself. You've got to have some outside influences, some outside opinions, and kind of help, for, the variation and just the variety of what you're trying to do. And we knew that Ben just had an incredible background and incredible talent in the kitchen. And so it just kind of worked out. We ended up meeting again. In fact, he was working at
Casa
Bovina in Lincoln, and he's got a farm north of our office where our test kitchen is. And so that's quite a trek every day. And then, in that position at the end of the day, you're breaking the line down and going back to the farm. And he came to me, it's like, Ann, it's just a lot. I'm working 60 hours a week in Lincoln, driving, 45 minutes plus each way. And this was easy for me to say, Ben, we've got quite a few concepts of creating. The test kitchen's right by your farm. It's going to be kind of a 9-to-5 job, except for when we're opening these concepts. And he was like, this sounds amazing. And it was great because, being good friends, I was also excited to work alongside him. And Tony, I think, kind of had the same past with him as well, where they were buds and friends and ended up working side by side. And I see the two of them, I don't know, 4 to 6 days a week working in the kitchen, and they work great together. I mean, it's like a perfect yin and yang in the kitchen.
Yeah, there was a lot of conversations with Ben in order to coax him to come under our team. But he, I think at the end of the day, for me specifically, like the thought process was I knew that he was incredibly talented, and I know I'm very good at realizing my capabilities and realizing my ceiling, and it just got to the point where we were creating redundancy within these menus, right? Because if you have one voice, and it's the same thing with an architectural firm inside a restaurant, sure. It's just all these little things. And it was important for me to find somebody that could then come in and give us a different perspective. And the idea is to take, Ben's immense knowledge and harvest that and figure out how to fit that into our world, and he's done it seamlessly,
I don't know about seamlessly.
Well, I mean, I have to rope it in sometimes. I like to call myself the Wrangler.
the Wrangler and the food. You just like giving yourself titles.
You have to understand, behind the scenes inside Flagship is systems. Yeah. And Ben doesn't come from that so much, right? So for him, there's been a learning curve, or I don't even know about a learning curve. I bet he would say he's learned a ton on just how to manage product behind the scenes from an inventory control standpoint, and just a lot of what goes into what it takes to be at a level like this.
Yeah.
Where he can come to your house tonight and cook you the most incredible meal, right? But turning that into opening concept after concept is kind of a different deal.
Standardizing it is the key word there. But
yeah.
No, he's been a great asset to the team, and he and I do really work well together. He teaches me a lot on the food side of things, and I think I teach him a lot on the operations side of things. And you start putting those two things together, and you can see kind of some of that harmoniously coming together when you see Cleo and Memoir. I think is we're on a new program that we're kind of going back and retooling some of our restaurants with. And again, it's all about creating consistency and making sure that if we're reducing a sauce, that it's reduced down perfectly every single time, and that if there is a pinch of salt, that pinch is exactly what it needs to be. And if it's a herbed out salad, making sure that those herbs are perfectly placed and perfectly put in so that it eats the way that it should be.
He's also not a good fisherman.
Well, he's only been once, so.
Yeah, I know, but it was disappointing.
Okay, you just said something really interesting there, Tony, that I want to hit on, because, I mean, I noticed, like, there's a pretty discernible shift between Memoir and Cleo and a lot of Flagship's other concepts. And I'm not saying anything bad about those, but, I mean, you go in those restaurants, and it's just like, they're gorgeous, and the attention to detail is just phenomenal. And the type of cuisine, it is just, it's so unique. It's a completely different experience than anything else you get in Omaha. And when you say, we kind of found, a new, I forget the exact terminology you just used, but like we had a new avenue that now we're kind of retrofitting into some of the other concepts. Mm-hmm. What is that, and what's that process like?
Without getting too drawn out on this, we have a process to develop anything, right? Mm-hmm. And that process from start to finish takes time. And there were just systems in the beginning that we just weren't doing. We were rushing. We really weren't taking the time to really standardize the way we needed to. And the recipes weren't translating the way they should. So there was a lot of what we call it cowboy cooking, which is, you're in the wild, wild west. You're not really following what you should be doing, and you're doing your own thing. You're off the cuffing it, And so we've really spent a lot of time and effort on streamlining these processes and making sure that the food tastes the way it should taste. If I just go in and say, oh, well, that's just a pinch of salt, and I don't actually know exactly how much that is, so we started weighing a lot of our spices instead of using tablespoons, and just some systems in place. We also started rolling out kind of a new training platform that helps empower the people that are cooking the food a little better than it used to in the past, and we're really just starting to get some good results from that.
Dan, what year do you have that Blatt opened when you were going through that?
I believe 2012.
I think that's right. So the other thing is, and you talked about this earlier when you were talking about walking into memoir and just kind of the visual, and then you're talking about what we just did and kind of the differences. I mean, we haven't opened a new concept in this city in 12 years. And if you think about 12 years, it's a lot of time for evolving of restaurants on the design and the food side. And we've opened another concept prior to Clio and Memoir called Pyro, but out of state. And so I think, in fairness, we haven't, this is kind of our first, or coming back into Omaha. And even with Blue, I mean, we haven't done a Blue here since Lincoln Blue Sushi. And if you went into a Blue in Power and Light, Kansas City, or Franklin, Tennessee, like our most recent ones, they're very different. Not from a menu standpoint, but again, a dining experience is not just the food; it's the ambiance, the service, the whole deal. And when you walk into our 3.0 version of Blue Sushi now, it's a whole different experience because of the new visual elements that are inside of what we do in Blue. And so I think that's, the Clio and Memoir, Tony touched on the food, and you asked about, just those concepts, but I think a lot of people are also drawn to just the design elements that our team's done such a fabulous job with. And we have two individuals that work internally for us, graphic designers, interior designers, and they're amazing. Really, really talented, and they're the ones that have kind of put the accents into Memoir and Clio and Pyro and even our new Blues, and
it's just evolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they've done a fantastic.
They've
job
done a tremendous job.
You go into Clio and it's like I'm not in Omaha anymore.
Yeah.
I'm in a different place, which is really special.
Well, thanks.
But I want to wrap up. We've done so much talking about the past. I want to wrap up current day and talk about Memoir, because that is self-described as our 20-year restaurant. It's kind of a culmination of all these different things, all these different concepts you guys have worked on. So if you go into Memoir, you can get a burger, you can get a steak, you can get pasta, you can get sushi. And when you just go in and look at the menu, you're just like, wow, this is kind of, it's all over the place and everything's good, but you're just like, what's the through line here? And the through line is Flagship. Mm-hmm. This is the evolution of this company. Like, was that kind of the idea as Memoir started to take focus, or when it was first suggested, like, let's celebrate what we've done here?
You want me to talk on it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I say Memoir is our 20-year restaurant, right? And, conceptually, it's an American grill. That's kind of where we landed conceptually. And it was important to us that if we were writing our memoir and we were doing our version of the American grill, well, first and foremost, it would have sushi. Sushi's become very Americanized, right? So, when you look at the menu, maybe at first it doesn't make sense, and I understand that. But once you eat it cohesively and you see how it kind of flows, it really does start to work.
I agree completely.
And, I think majority of people get that. But, there's also some recipes that are embedded inside of that menu that have been around for a long time. There's a gyoza on that particular menu that Blue had for years and years and years. And there's a couple, we have Pyro's Burger on there, and there's just a few more examples of that kind of embody that, just trying to bring this thing full circle, and that's exactly what Memoir was. It was a moment in time culminating up into that point of all the years of, all those experiences. And I think that you never know how well that's going to translate, but I think at the end of the day, it translated really well. So,
yeah. I would agree. And it's really fun to see just all that history come together kind of in one place. Last question I got for you guys here, and then I'll get you out of here. Tony, I believe it was you. I found a quote from 2002 that said your goal was to open 6 to 10 restaurants a year for the next 10 years. I don't know if that's still the goal. Maybe that's increased, maybe that's decreased. I don't know. But Omaha, Anthony, you mentioned, is got a couple new concepts coming, including Ghost Donkey, which I'm really excited about. As you guys look at the future of Flagship, what do you see? Where is this rocket ship going next?
I see no more new concepts. I feel like we've actually finally probably hit our limit.
Maybe Italian a few years down the road.
Just from being able to have the correct oversight and management, you're starting to get a little spread thin. And I feel like we've got enough neat vehicles now to kind of go, take Clio and Memoir, West Omaha, out of state, Plank as well.
Refine.
And we've been moving really fast. So it's going to be nice to maybe get into 2025 and kind of step back for a second. And like Tony said, refine and just kind of dig in and get our systems kind of buttoned back up. And not that they've fallen off the tracks, but there's just a lot of details with all these new concepts and making sure we're giving back to our people and what they need to make sure they continue to have the tools and that we're setting them up for success. So I feel like it will probably slow down a little bit. We're actually opening 6 more locations in the next 4 months. And that's outside of Champagne Lanes and Ghost Donkey, which opens here in Omaha. So outside of those, we've got 6 more probably by February of next year. And then I think we'll just kind of get all, huddle back up and kind of decide what the next step's going to be. But it'll probably be a break for 10 to 12 months. And just, it's important to not outgrow, yourself and to make sure that you can kind of, because what ends up happening in that situation is you start to let your team down, and they start to feel lost and unheard and we're scrambling. And so I think it's going to be a nice time to just kind of all get back together and
reconnect
and just kind of see what we need to do. But, I think at that point, then once we've kind of said, okay, we're good and we've got everything all tightened up again, start opening, Clio, Memoir, Plank, Blue, again, more in Nebraska and more just kind of in markets that we're already in. I don't think we'll end up jumping in any. We're in 13 states right now, and I kind of like the map of that from an accessibility standpoint, and we're already in those markets with established partnerships from the food service to the liquor side, and we've got teams that we already are building in those markets. So I think it'll probably continue to just be those 13 states. A lot more growth in Arizona, a lot more growth in Texas, probably some more growth in Illinois, and then Kansas and Missouri are just wonderful states, and I think there's some opportunities there too with just their proximity. So I think that should kind of ride us for the next 10 years.
Well, I thank you guys so much for putting in the hard work and creating just this restaurant group that has given Omaha so much and now has given other states, so much too. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, you saying that we've given Omaha so much, I just want to close by saying that I speak for Anthony and I to say that we're proud that we're from Omaha, and we're very grateful for all the people and all the customers that have supported us through the years, and we can't say thank you enough, So we don't really get to do that very often in a public forum, but I mean, without you guys, none of this would be possible. So
yeah, I mean, it's been amazing to have been so supported, and to have met so many wonderful guests that are now like really good friends, and that also extends to just our team. But I would agree with Tony. It's we appreciate the support, and it's been fun. We're certainly excited for again Champagne Lanes and Ghost Donkey here as well coming up, and yeah, thanks, Dan. Appreciate you having us.
Of course. The pleasure was all mine. Thank you guys for taking the time to come on the show.
Yeah.
This was
awesome.
Really fun getting to go down memory lane a little bit.
Yeah,
so
thanks.
Hope it was fun for you too.
Yeah, it's great. We enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Omaha, as always, thanks for eating with us.